Contaminated drinking water kills countless children every day. You can help stop death. Visit lifetoday.org/water for life to give clean drinking water today.
I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. I'm Randy Robison. Great to have you here. We're going to talk about a tough topic today, but if you are suffering from grief and from the loss, especially of a child, especially an infant child, I want you to stick around because it'll be difficult, but it can be the beginning of healing. I lost my sister. She was 40 years old, and my parents, still to this day, it's very, very difficult. They say losing a child is the toughest thing, and I have not experienced that. I'm thankful. I'm thankful, but I know others who have, and I want to offer some hope and some healing. So to do that, I have a guest today who helps a lot of women, and it's out of her own pain. You'll hear her story, but she's got a new book called Cradled Hope. It looks just like this. It's available wherever you get books, and we'll tell you about her website where you can get it because there's a lot of resources. You know, the fact that the word hope is in the title, I think, is key, because when you're in the loss, when you're in the grief, when you're in the heartache and in the questions and the confusion and the doubt sometimes, if you're a Christian, hope is really what you need. So we're going to offer you that today. So if you're in that place or you know someone who is in that place, you can hit that share button and just know that you're going to get some hope today. My guest is Ashley Opliger, and she's the author of the book as well. And she has a wonderful ministry we'll tell you about, but she joins me. Welcome, Ashley. It's good to have you on Life Today Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this is such a hard topic, and I want to be sensitive, but yet at the same time, I want to point people in the right direction. Would you let our listeners know a little bit of what you've been through? Because I know for those who have been in that similar situation, they will start to relate to you as they hear your story.
Yeah. So my husband, Matt, and I, we were married in 2014, and shortly thereafter we were expecting, which was such a blessing. We were so excited to start and grow our family. And I really didn't know much about loss. And so I just naively went into pregnancy thinking that, there wasn't going to be any complications or anything like that. And so my first trimester was pretty normal. I was working and feeling a little bit morning sickness, but other than that, I was doing just normal. And so one day I was at work. I was a speech pathologist before I started this ministry, and I started having really heavy bleeding, and I was rushed to the emergency room. And at that point is when they told me I had a subchorionic hemorrhage, and I was put on bed rest for 11 weeks. Thankfully, she was still alive, but a lot of the area around my womb was bleeding, and they said there's really nothing we can do except for you to just take it very easy. So I spent 11 weeks in bed just praying for the best possible outcome, but at the same time going to the doctor's appointments and them giving us a pretty grim prognosis because of the extent of the hemorrhaging. And so it was a really, really hard time for me in my walk of faith, of just wondering where God was in the midst of this and how he could allow this to happen, and just really questioning where he was in the midst of it. But that was an important part of my faith journey.
Yeah. Well, and it can be a destructive part for some people. You mentioned some of the things that you're struggling with, obviously, and where's God in this, right? Where did you get any sort of resolution or comfort, or we don't always know why, so I almost hate to ask the question why, but where did you end up, or are you still trying to figure things out?
No, I've come a long way in my healing. So it really, the darkest part of the journey was during my pregnancy and during the bed rest, because I was praying so hard for a miracle, and it felt like my prayers weren't being answered. And I know so many people who are listening today have found themselves in similar situations, and you just think that God has abandoned you and that he's not there. And that wasn't true. I was viewing God through the lens of my circumstances. And sometimes when you do that, you have a very skewed view of who God really is. And the shift really came for me after she was born. I went into labor at 24 weeks, 5 days, and she was already in the arms of Jesus. And my mom pulled out this beautiful knit little cradle that she had made for her. And we were able to hold her in there. She was only 13 ounces, but she was perfectly, fearfully, wonderfully made. And we held her in there and we were able to love on her. And that moment just gave me so much peace. I knew that my daughter was in heaven. And from that point forward, although there was great grief and heartbreak and pain, there was a peace that God brought to me that she was in heaven. I was going to see her again. And from there, out of that pain, God started showing us this calling to start a ministry and to comfort others with the same comfort he gave us. And really, that was a shifting point for me in my grief.
Yeah, yeah. No doubt. And I do hear this a lot from people who have different levels of loss. Loss is loss, and grief is grief. But I hear that God shows up in ways that they hadn't maybe seen before. I mean, I'm guessing that it's just God pouring out his grace and comfort in those difficult times, which you don't really know until you're there. Is that what you experienced?
Yes, I definitely feel that you have the most intimacy with Jesus in suffering because you need him and you rely on him. And even though you might have questions and doubts, if you take them to him and you're just really honest with him, he will heal your heart. He'll give you the answers and the wisdom from his word. But it is a really painful place to be in the valley. But I've found that that is where I walk closest with my Savior, and he sanctifies me the most in my suffering, which is an unpleasant experience, but in the end, it is making me more like Christ.
That doesn't sound fun at all.
No.
and I don't think we need to kid people. Let me ask you this: because I find this impacts a lot of people, and I've been in lots of different sort of denominational backgrounds, and our view of prayers and prayers that are answered, and healing and deliverance and protection, really. It varies, almost denominationally, more so in the past than today. But what was your background? In other words, did you believe that if you just said the right prayer, you would get what you want?
Well, so I'm non-denominational, but I think I had some errors in my theology, and I actually write about this in my book quite a bit, because I do think the prosperity gospel is pretty prevalent in today's culture, especially in America. And even though we might not think, well, that's being preached in my church, if you have the viewpoint that if you go through something really hard or you're suffering, that God must not love you and that you must have done something wrong to deserve that, or he's punishing you. Right. In other words, if you're a Christian, you're going to be blessed and you're not going to go through hardship. That's not the true gospel. That's a false gospel. And I didn't really realize that I had those beliefs until I started walking through really difficult suffering. And I started thinking about the way I was viewing God. And I was thinking, wow, I really did expect for him to bless me and to answer every prayer in the way that I wanted. I wanted my life story to be the way that I would write it. And unfortunately, the brokenness of this world, I don't believe that God causes babies to die, but I do believe that sin in the world, the brokenness from the fall, there are diseases and infections and complications in our bodies that it happens. And it's a really sad reality of living on a broken earth. But thank God for Jesus, because he overcame the grave and he's given us a way to see our babies again in heaven. And so really at that point for me, when I realized I'm going to see my daughter again, and I get that truth from the Bible, and because Jesus died for me, that was a turning point from seeing him through my circumstances and then seeing him for his good character from his word.
Yeah, and that you nailed it, because I have I have a lot of friends who believe that someone just lacked faith and that's why they had loss in their lives. And it's like, no, I mean, you go through scripture and death is part of life, and it's not easy. And I think in a healthy way, it should push you towards a more eternal perspective, to go, this is just a vapor, whether it's a few weeks or a few decades, it's still in in the grand scheme of eternity, it's not long at all. Did you learn that or find that you adopted a bit more of an eternal view of things when you went through this?
Yes, absolutely. So my book is all about heaven because that is my greatest hope. I have a section called Our Future Forever, and there's a subsection in that chapter called Homesick because I truly am homesick. It's an interesting thing to say that I'm longing for my heavenly home. Some people might think that that's suicidal. I believe that's biblical to long for to be with our Savior in a good and perfect paradise and long for the day that we're in glorified bodies on the new earth. And so that is such a part of my journey is that I just have the hope of heaven in my heart. And I know that the things that I go through on this earth, as broken and painful as they are, there's going to be a day that God wipes away every tear that I've cried. And there's many. Sometimes I think, wow, it's good. It's a good thing that there's eternity because He's going to be wiping my tears for a very long time. But it's going to be so amazing. And I will see my daughter and I will see my dad again. And I think that holding on and just clinging to the hope that this world is not our permanent home, that we're citizens of heaven, is so important.
Yeah, and you mentioned your dad, and that's another thing. When things happen, and you go, why would God allow that to happen? Was that different? The same? I mean, what were some of the things you struggled with there? And for those who don't know, your father was killed in a hit and run accident, correct?
Yes, he was killed by a drunk driver in a hit and run last summer. And that was the greatest grief and trauma I've ever been through in my life. And I don't say that lightly because I've been through a lot of hard things. It's hard to compare grief. And a lot of times I say that it's not worth doing because grief really is grief. But there were some very unique aspects to this. One is just how sudden and senseless it was, that this was a completely preventable tragedy, that someone could have gotten an Uber home and my dad would still be alive today. And so that's been really hard to grapple with, that someone else's sin and reckless choices took my dad's life and has altered my life and my mom's and my siblings and his siblings' lives forever. And there's the aspect of really needing to surrender, to forgive, and to walk out his legacy. And that's something I'm still learning and working through as we're going through the court system and trying to find justice, but also mercy at the same time. And so there's been a lot of really unique aspects of the grief. And obviously, being that he was my dad my whole life, and I have 36 years of wonderful memories with him, the grief is very, very deep, and we very much miss him and long for the day that we'll see him again.
That's rough. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And the senselessness, I think, is another aspect that it would be easy, one, to lose hope, but also to be angry, to be pessimistic, fatalistic. And when you talk about longing for heaven, I mean, I know you don't mean that in a suicidal manner, right? But you can just kind of check out of this life and be like, this is, you can take the shortness of it and translate that into meaninglessness of it if you're not careful. So what gives you meaning and hope in the grief?
I think there's something about when you encounter the death of a loved one, you really start thinking about your own mortality and the fact that life is a vapor, like you said, and that my days are numbered, just as my daughter's days were numbered, my dad's days are numbered, and God in His sovereignty has numbered all of our days. And I think when I look at that, I think, well, I am longing for heaven, but I want to make the rest of my days count for His kingdom. I want to live with urgency to share the gospel, because it also made me realize that you can't assume that you have another day with someone you love. You don't have another day, even you might not have another day yourself. And I know that sounds a little pessimistic, but it's the truth. Each day we wake up and God gives us breath, and we have as Christians to be following the Great Commission and to be proclaiming the gospel and sharing his hope with people. And the time is short. He could come back any day, or we could go home to him. And so I think for me, the longing for heaven has made me feel as though my days on earth are even more important. And there's an urgency there, because once we're in heaven forever, we won't need to share the gospel anymore. We're going to be there forever. And so the time is now to share hope and to share what Christ has done for us.
Yeah, that is part of the title, Hope, right there. Cradled in Hope by Ashley Opliger. It's available now wherever you get books. And if you need some comfort, you need someone to walk with you, Ashley's willing to do it through her own experience that she's put down in print. But, I think one of the healthiest things we can do, and you need to do it at a healthy point, so deal with the grief first. But if you feel especially led, if you're a Christian, you can take some of the remnants of that grief, but take some of the healing, and you can comfort others. And that is what Ashley has done. So Ashley, tell us a little bit about, out of your own pain, you're actually helping others walk through their pain and find the hope that you found.
Yeah. So that little cradle that I told you my mom had made that we got to hold Bridget in on the day that she was born, that little cradle changed the trajectory of my life. After she was born, the local hospital here in Wichita, they reached out to us and said, we really need something like this to hold babies that are born in the second trimester. We're putting babies in medical basins and in washcloths, and this is not dignifying to a little baby's life. And so my mom started making more cradles, and we donated them to our local hospital. Shortly thereafter, we were on our local news station and shared about what we were doing, with the hopes that we would be able to find more volunteers to help our other hospital in town. And that story aired nationwide. We ended up going viral. Hospitals all across the country said, we need these cradles. And so I quit my job. I resigned from my career and started doing ministry full time. And we just celebrated 10 years of being in ministry this past month. And the Lord has done so much in these 10 years. We're now in 1,600 hospitals in all 50 states. We've donated over 280,000 cradles and keepsakes for families across the country. And although those numbers seem, like a big number, really, that what's most important is that we are trying to share the gospel with each family, that there is hope that they can see their baby again, and the separation that death has caused is only temporary.
So for someone who is either in need or they want to help you in this, what's the best way for them to get involved?
So we have knitters and crocheters all across the country. You can sign up on our website, and you make them from home, and then you ship them to our headquarters here in Kansas, and we sew the edges on. We add our little booklet of resources for the families, because we also have Hope Online, which is our online support group that we do every month for grieving moms. We have a podcast called Cradled in Hope, and that releases episodes every month, and a lot of resources, free ebooks centered on grieving and healing. Also an ebook for people to know how to support a loved one who is going through grief and how you can love them through this really difficult season. And so we just have a lot of resources on there, and we share those inside our cradles. So when the family receives the cradle and they go home with empty arms, that they do have a community they can connect with, and they can walk alongside, and they have resources to support them that point them to the hope of the gospel.
I'm assuming that you've got some pretty incredible stories of comfort and healing over the 10 years. What stands out to you in the women that are comforted through you quitting your job and starting full-time outreach like this?
There's so many amazing stories, but I'm going to tell you Heather's story. So Heather is a mom who, when she was holding her full-term little boy named Levi in the hospital, she went onto Instagram and was trying to search for the hashtag stillbirth, and she came upon my story. And literally right there, as she was holding her son that was already in heaven in her arms, she reached out to me, and we got connected. She started listening to our podcast, started coming to our online support group, and then through the last 3 years of her healing journey, she is now leading our support groups when I can't lead them. She leads our Facebook group for moms, and she even blessed me in flying from Alabama out to Wichita, Kansas for my book launch, because it just was so meaningful to her to get to meet me and be out here. And honestly, it's just such a beautiful picture of what the Lord can do through a healed heart and how she is using her grief for good to comfort others. And I'm just so proud of her. And there's so many women that I serve with in the ministry that have done the same thing, that they're serving in memory of their baby, and they're what makes this organization what it is, because there's so many people that want to use their grief and comfort others in their pain.
It's a beautiful expression of hope, and you are uniquely situated to be able to come along someone in that really difficult and dark time. By the way, you mentioned the podcast. I want to show people your other website, and this is ashleyOpliger.com, and you can go to the podcast. It's right there on that kind of, what is that, orange? I don't know my colors, bar. But there are resources there. Of course, the book. But that's another place that if you're wanting, if you need a little support, Ashley's out there doing it, and you can join her from wherever you're at. And so do reach out. I mean, it's such a difficult thing. What would you say, Ashley, to the mother who, whether it was yesterday or whether it was years ago, is still really just sort of stuck in that grief? What would you say to that woman?
Yeah. It can feel so often when you're in fresh waves of grief or even years out and you don't feel like you've fully had your loss validated. And a lot of times, culture will minimalize your grief. And so many women suffer silently through this. But what I want to tell you is that you are seen and you are loved and you are cradled in hope, that the same God that is holding your baby in heaven and promises you eternity with them is holding your heart too. And I think that's the beauty of the picture on the front of my cover, is that Jesus is holding on to the mom just as he's holding the baby. And that's been really comforting to me, to know that he is a present God. He is Emmanuel, God who is with us. And so often I think when we're grieving, we feel so alone. And the enemy certainly wants us to feel alone and isolated, because that's when he does his best work of stealing, killing, and destroying. And so I think when we really come alongside a community and we have other people pointing us to hope, and we're reading our Bibles and we're just being saturated with the truth, because so often, we, like I said before, we have these errors in our theology, and we get to a point where we don't trust God because we think, well, why would a good God allow my baby to die? And we have a hard time reconciling that.
Yeah.
But when we really understand who he is and his good nature and the hope-filled future we have, and it really does change how we grieve and eventually how we heal.
Yeah, and I would encourage anyone who, if you're not a Christian, or if you maybe just kind of went to church, but you wonder about this God because you don't really know him, I would encourage you to lean in, even in your pain. God can handle your questions in your pain, even your doubts. One of his own disciples doubted him, and all he did was invite him in to touch him. And for some of you, that's what you need is that touch. And you will find that, yes, you will grieve. Anyone that tells you that you won't grieve is not telling you the truth. But the scripture tells us we don't grieve as those who have no hope. And that's what we're telling you. Yes, you're grieving. It is right to grieve. It is natural to grieve. You should grieve. But we want to give you that hope, and you can find that. Ashley's book is available. And by the way, if you want to get involved and help others and offer that hope, again, bridgetscradles.com, the website. You can go. You can be a part. So reach out. Let's be the hands and feet of Jesus. Those of us who are believers, we can comfort people in their pain. Ashley, bless you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate the time you spent today. Is there anything else that you want to mention before I let you go?
Just thank you so much for this opportunity. And I just want to encourage anyone who's suffering any sort of loss right now, that God is with you. He's for you. He's not going to leave you in your pain. He loves you very much. And so often we feel that he's not, but he is, and he will show his faithfulness to you if you just lean in and really surrender and walk with him. Yeah.
And if you want to encourage somebody right now, hit that share button. And if you haven't liked, follow, or subscribe here at Life Today Live, or Life Today TV, our handle, I would invite you to do that. We'll continue to offer you some encouragement and reach out. Ashley's book's available now wherever you get books. Appreciate you being here, and we'll see you again next time here on Life Today Live.
of divine mercy.